This week on Cameo, we explore Jamaican ceramics.
I'm an artist and I set up my own studio to basically make what I want and hopefully sell enough that I can keep making more.
David Pinto enjoys creating one-of-a-kind vessels and sculptures. His studio also produces a range of functional pottery for sale on location at select stores, galleries, and at island hotels and villas. His work is a part of the permanent collection of the National Gallery of Jamaica and numerous private collections in Japan, the US, and Jamaica. I stopped by his studio at Good Hope.
I make a whole range of work in clay. I make functional dinnerware, a range of sizes of mug and bowl and plate and cup, which are ongoing and people can add to and replace the same size. Then I make more one-of-a-kind pieces. These little bowls here are in part decorative, in part sculptural. I make all sorts of other functional items and then also some sculpture. I decided about, 25 years ago that I was going to move back home, try and do what I love, which is making stuff in clay, and see if I could basically afford to do that. And the fact that I'm still here is, I guess, the ultimate success. Within that framework, there are lots of different high points. I've enjoyed being involved with the National Gallery when I was. Being an invited artist there is flattering to have a group of clients, patrons, people out there who like what I do and ask for it. One of the things that at the very beginning I set up was international workshop. I was living in New York City for a while. The studio I was working at there, when I told them I was moving home to Jamaica, they sort of laughed at me and said I was going to end up in the bush with gray hair and hiding away from people and losing track of what was happening in the world of clay and art and the bigger world. And they said, organize workshops, invite us down, we'll pay to come down and take over your studio and you can have people there to teach. And the top shelf over there are some of those different visiting artists who've come down, and basically every year someone comes down to work in my studio with me, and it's people who are leaders in the field. And that's been extraordinary. This year we have a couple of scholarships of locals who are going to be involved as well, students from the School of Art. And they'll have a chance to work with some of these leaders in our field as well, which I think is a very significant shift when your point of reference is the best in the world. The process starts as clay, so it starts as soft plastic material. We mold that either part or all of the way in its soft form, allow it to dry part of the way. These are, we call it leather hard, it's dried part way. When they're wet, they're soft like plasticine. So then this process here, this piece will then, once it's finished, be allowed to get perfectly dry, bone dry. Generally fired to a relatively low temperature, biscuit fired. And then after that, it's taken out the kiln, glazed, and fired again. So the first firing is to red heat to make the work permanent. This stuff, this clay, is when bone dry, extremely fragile. And if in water, it'll dissolve back to slurry, and this can be recycled. Once it's been fired to a low temperature, it's like soft stone, can't be recycled. And then it's glazed and fired again, generally to a higher temperature, and that glaze makes it permanent and adds the color and decoration. There are lots of challenges which are related to the medium. So there are lots of issues with getting clay to do what you want it to do and drying the right way and go through the process. Then there are challenges in terms of most artists are not so good at marketing and promotion. So there's that side of it. And then there's raw materials, because a lot of what we need is not easily available locally. And so then it's import-export scenarios. And I think the biggest surprise to me and the biggest challenge and maybe disappointment is that it's easy to import and it's really challenging to export if you're not exporting full containers. You know, big business has containers. The factory here has air-conditioned containers leaving every week. There's a whole infrastructure set up to do that. And then if you want to ship one little thing with a courier, that's also very easy and expensive. But it's that in-between that's very challenging. Because I have groups of students that come around, and you know, I'll show them in the little gallery there. I have some large pieces that might be a few 100,000 Jamaican for a big sculpture. And I can see the little brain ticking away and thinking, why? Because I really do this, you know, make a good money. You can put any price you want on anything you want. That doesn't have anything to do with income. And it is a challenging business. It's a challenging way to make an income. There are a lot of other things I think that are a lot easier. If it is your passion and you love making things in clay, then absolutely you should make things in clay. I think that a person who sets up a business has a certain business mind, business approach to what they're doing. A business person might actually do market research and find out what the market wants and actually make what the market wants and have a way to market it. And an artist is more likely to make what they want to make, which probably leads to a happier person.
Coming up next. Touch by VLS is a contemporary ceramic studio that produces art and artisanal pieces for exhibition and retail in local and global markets. Jamaican ceramist Victoria Silvera spoke to us about her work.
By VLS, it basically encompasses a ceramics line. I have made the Urchin collection, and it's basically crockery sculpture and lighting, with design references that center on the sea and the ocean and, you know, our Caribbean lifestyle. My ceramics that I'm creating here, it's a far cry from what I did in college, you know. It's brighter, it's sunnier, and still has my trademark things that I like to do. I'm very intense with detail. I had returned, I had migrated back to Jamaica after being in the US for 10 years. I did my bachelor's and then my master's, and I worked there. And because of the recession and the poor job market, I had to leave. When I came home, I tried to work in film production, and I don't think I tried very hard. I'm kind of a very introverted person, and I mean, I don't know all the right people, so it's not that I've given up on it, but I was like, I have to make a living. I took an art class at Sana with Norma Arak, and I started making pottery again, and I started with a teapot. And I had been traveling around with just a couple pieces I'd made in college in my car, and I went to Mount Edge one day, and I saw Robin Fox and Michael Fox, and he said, boy, these cups are great, why you don't make me 23 of these? And I said, okay. So he was my first, like, kind of little client, you know? This is another example of some of the carved work I do. This is a very intricately carved pear-shaped vessel. It was supposed to be used as a pendant light. This is a sea fan reference, so all the little perforations and whatnot are meant to look like the netting of a sea fan. I thought I was making big money, you know, when I went to the Branson Center, and they made us write down all the money we'd ever spent on what was pre-launch of my business and how much money I'd made. I think I nearly cried when I saw the profit margin. I was like, when you talk about operating at a loss, you know. initially the biggest challenge for me was financing my business. I had some savings put aside, but after a while there's only so much money you can, slip from your wrist and bleed into your business. After a while you start feeling a little anemic and you need a capital injection. So I definitely was feeling the need for funding because I needed my own equipment to start firing my pieces. I had an issue, I couldn't find a kiln to fire after a while because people just don't really want to lend their kilns. It's a lot of wear and tear, and it will depreciate the value of your equipment. When I started the Branson Center, I didn't know it would lead to funding, but it did because I was in a Pitch to Rich competition and I met Sir Richard Branson himself, and I had pitched for money, and after that, based on that, he offered all 3 participants in the competition half of what I had asked for. So because of that, they had to actually formalize a loan process and find a bank to mediate the loan, and it took a year, and that was a slow, poor year for me, but that was the year I officially launched. I stuck it out, and by January the following year I received the loan. So I was able to bring in my first shipment of raw materials. That's one of the biggest challenges with ceramics industry in Jamaica. We don't have commercial grade clay. You need to take the clay out of the earth, but it has to be tested, has to have a uniform amount of silica in there. It should be taken out, put back in the right amount. Otherwise, you fire your pieces, half of them break, It's just devastating in terms of the time and the effort and the money lost to breakage in the kiln, because we don't have commercial grade clay produced here. So I had to import all my clay. Clay in and of itself, it's a relatively cheap material, but you have to jump hurdles. You have to get permits. You have to be tax compliant. It's just a never-ending list of bureaucracy that you have to conquer. If you want to bring them in duty-free, you have to be registered with the GMA. You have to go to the Ministry of Industry. Then you have to go to the Customs Department. So bureaucratic red tape, finance, lack of access to materials, equipment, those were all big challenges for me in the beginning. But when you're determined and you realize it's either this or I go work for someone, it's either this or I need to build my life. If I don't do this, somebody else will tell me what to do and I'll probably earn less money anyways. I noticed that industries where there are like technical schools and spaces already set up, infrastructures in place, that there is hope for more successful and thriving industry. Courtney Walsh and the late Michelle Haynes, they both had set up factory spaces and have set up factory spaces downtown, and they've been able to utilize the graduates from Garmex. So I think when you can plug people into very practical education, and then they can actually be filtered into these jobs, and we have these designers here waiting to produce, and they have these distribution lines already set up. That's a thriving cycle. So we need to create more thriving cycles. Maybe one day I will be able to manufacture clay, because when I talked to Carib Save, who works with fishermen and other artisans, they said one of the challenges for getting into ceramics was that they can't find processed clay cheaply here. So maybe I can filter more clay to these artisans. Maybe more people can go to Edna Manley for ceramics instead of dropping out to the department, and we can have more people working in ceramics. It's just about creating that value proposition, not only about the product, but about the lifestyle and the work and the longevity of it. I think people have accepted this fallacy that art isn't profitable, that being an artist isn't profitable. But the thing is, I've never been more sure and more stable than I am now as an artist, accepting what I do and working actively in it, with it, towards it. I'm being distributed, I'm being retailed in all of Couples, all the Couples gift shops. I'm in a couple galleries. I mean, from, making 23 cups informally for someone to actually being distributed island-wide, and then to actually having met Richard Branson, and, it's like, well, Richard Branson has some of my work in his home in Necker Island. My pieces have traveled the world in a way that I haven't yet, and it's kind of ridiculous to me. It's funny. Definitely, there's going to be a lot of research and development, and I want to come out with streamlined, not necessarily mass manufactured, not 1 million units, maybe 1,000, 2,000 that I want to distribute to a very select amount of design showrooms in the United States. And it's also been on my mind. I want to attend a lighting convention and kind of get more into that industry and commercial clay production. When I say commercial, I mean construction as well.
Coming up next. The Jamaica Business Development Corporation, JBDC, has been established as one of the premier business support organizations in Jamaica and is well respected by clients and funding institutions alike.
The Jamaica Business Development Corporation is the premier business development support agency of the government of Jamaica. And what that means is that as businesses grow, we are really trying to encourage the movement of entrepreneurs and the growth of businesses in Jamaica to boost the economy. Our role is to ensure that these businesses succeed, or at least have a fighting chance. Think Jamaican is a marketing brand used by Jamaica Business Development Corporation to promote products, Jamaican-made products, authentic Jamaican-made products. And so what we do is provide the first access point to market for new products and to assist existing products in establishing new markets. We provide a suite of services that include business development support, product development, market testing, and essentially at the end of the day to get products into market and to get the businesses growing. Well, we have seen numerous clients over the years come in with just a brainstorming idea and have been able to transform those clients into real businesses with successful products moving from local markets into export markets. And so that for us is the success. We want persons to dream big and then help them to implement their dreams. And we have seen numerous clients grow. And our success stories really climax when they branch into new markets and they become independent of the organization and can now handle their business growth on their own. Well, we have a number of key partners that we work with. The first thing we need to do is establish what are the exporting standards, what are the barriers to entry for products going into international markets. And we have quite a number of agencies that we work with to make sure that we can inform the clients effectively. We also work with Jampro, who is our main trade partner in getting products from local to international markets. And what we do essentially is tap into these niche markets or relevant markets overseas, maybe do trade shows and events, links with buyers and so on, and create that connection. And also to look at critical data and trends that are informing the changes, what are the competitive issues that you will encounter. And with that collection of activities, we come up with strategies to get products into market. So for each product type, you really have to design different strategies. Consistent supplies of raw materials. Quite a number of them may not have the resources and capacity to go overseas and do the sort of traveling to source and identify raw materials. And so they are basically left to what the environment is offering them. For those who can't access international sources, we have a big issue locally in harvesting raw materials. We may have the raw materials sourced locally, But in terms of getting it into a form that allows for manufacturing, that's something that we really need to look at, the backward linkages and the value chain. So we do have some issues in that regard, but they are pretty solvable with planning. You might not be able to solve it in the first year, but if we can really establish that there's a demand for this finished product and it requires these sort of raw materials, and we can really document what numbers are, we can inform farmers, grow this crop because this raw material source is needed. So that's the sort of planning we need to do. Well, we have been doing a lot more data collection. It starts there, and a lot more research and development into new sources of raw materials that are available locally. The most effective production strategy is really to utilize raw materials that are easily accessible to you. And so we have been looking at our landscape, looking at the raw materials that are in large volumes locally, and then looking at developing products to satisfy that demand, right? And so we've been looking at that. We've been looking at ensuring that we create connections and linkages and providing these producers with enough data that links them to the raw material source directly. We have been trying to encourage the producers to cluster and partner with each other to bring in, large volumes. Individually, maybe they may not be able to bring in a container load of this raw material, but collectively they can. So we have been trying to encourage collective working and clustering. The primary issue is really production and our production processes and being scalable. They may be able to produce 100 units given their current resources, but in order to respond to growth and demand, they would need to use different types of technology. Now that has a cost, and as a government agency, our resources are limited. And if we are going to provide the kind of growth support that is required, we really would have to be able to invest in that technology first and foremost, so that they can probably use them as in incubators and so on, until they are able to generate their own machinery. So at the end of the day, it comes back to money and resources. We are better able to provide technical support and brain power, but as it relates to physical support and financing, these are going to be limitations that we would have. Well, we have recently embarked on launching a new magazine called True Stories, and really what we want to do is to expose the back end story of these producers. I think there are fascinating stories out there, and to change the conversation. We don't want to talk necessarily only about what can't be done. Quite a number of businesses and producers are doing amazing things, producing amazing products, and we want to really tap into those stories, and we want consumers and Jamaicans alike to read these stories and really understand what the potential is that exists, and perhaps get their own inspiration from those stories.
And that's it this week for Cameo. Even in the midst of challenges, our creative industries continue to shine. I've been your host, Amita Prasad Webb.